do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I add an FYI about my holiday PTO, just for you to be aware. Yeah, I have the only point in the agenda. Feel free to add more if you want. And it's just about I actually had it wasn't meant to be, but I had the last two calls, so in back-to-back fashion, and we were just talking about this with other designers as well, about how we can have more predictability about what we're going to do and work on. And yeah, and just the disclaimer here is that I don't think that's I don't think that's a burden that should only be on the PM's shoulder. It should be on the whole team to accomplish that. But just in general, how we can do that more, because from my side, I'll tell you that there's yeah, designers are always spread too thin across many different things. And in case you haven't noticed, but but yeah, it's just there's a big burden and sense of expectation from everyone that the issues that go into the build track. So, like for example, for 13.8, that in theory all of them should be as scoped out and as detailed as possible for engineering to get started on them and then create MRs and do all of that. And I mean, this is a generalization, and of course, some issues are not ready when the milestone starts, and we end up discussing some things and change between the milestone. But it would be, but that again, that puts a lot of pressure on design to get everything right, and I mean, at the end also, I think product management to make sure that we're focusing the efforts on the right things and that we have everything ready for engineering. Um, yeah, and I'm just wondering how we can work more ahead. And yeah, so I'll leave it at that. And just for your comments in general, what do you think are some tactics that we can apply to have more predictability?
Yeah, I think the big one is focus. And I think this group lacks, I don't want to say a tremendous amount, but a tremendous amount of focus. I think there are
Yeah, I
a
agree.
ton of competing ideas and things being built at a breadth level that are not that don't have the follow-up like depth level to them to like know where we're going or what we're going to do. I mean, you can sort of look at like, let's take 13.7. So 13.7 has merge refs, which have been around forever and like aren't completely well understood because we haven't tested and done. 13.7 has the check mark for I viewed a file in it. 13.7 has some additional toggles to file by file navigation. 13.7 has what else did I just go write release post for? Let me just look. 13.7 has custom commit messages for suggested changes. And it has reviewers. All in 13.7. There's like 5 different things that are, of all of those, I would say custom commit messages are depth. Like they're the one, probably the only thing in there that is depth on an existing feature. Everything else is sort of like a first iteration on a new thing. And I would argue that like from an outsider looking in, and this is new perspective onto the group, but none of them are related. Like none of these things are related to each other yet. We can probably build and get there, but like the theme of them is not tied together enough to know that like we're building reviewers and we built this file change thing, or the mark is viewed, and I could make some logical leaps that say, well, what we could now do is show a list of reviewers and actually which files they reviewed, because we have the data that they were a reviewer and we have the data of the file they were there. But like I'm willing to bet we don't have an issue that says that we're going to do that, or that we've thought that far down the path that says that we were going to do that, because most of
Yeah.
the reviewers thought was actually about like finding a reviewer who's the right reviewer who can approve it, and how do we select that right person, versus what do we do with a reviewer in terms of communicating status to other things. And so that's a long-winded way of saying that what we need to do is focus what we're going to go do and go and to me it is much more efficient to build deep down into something, because you can start thinking through those next things, and you can go and figure out what the next things you're going to do, and that allows design to get ahead and product to get ahead and your research to be much more focused, because now we're talking about like, well, really what the things that we want to know about are, um, how do we communicate status better of where the review is, right? Like how do we deal with that problem space versus like how do we deal with the problem space of reviewers and which things they can approve and sort of all of that, or how do we deal with tracking files and all of that. Like if you've got a very good connected theme, then you can focus your research and focus the designs and focus everything that we're thinking about to go and lay those issues out. So to me it's focus. What I linked you to was the MR where I'm rewriting the direction. Right now I'm reframing the way we think about um, what we want to accomplish in code review, so that we can use that to go inform the things that we go work on. And so I would say that is my answers to that question. It was my experience in editor that when we had epics that were better scoped, and the legwork from product and design had been put into them to like build out where we wanted to go multiple iterations ahead, that you could get um, sort of more efficiently moved, and there weren't like day of implementation questions. Um, there's an added thing that I'm hoping happens, is that one of the things I have noticed with this group so far is that it doesn't appear that engineers feel a sense of ownership over the things we're shipping. And so the more that we can get epics built out that dictate a vision with good design and well-articulated problems and other things, the easier it is to let engineers pick up those epics and sort of start figuring out what the implementation path is to do that, and owning the completion and seeing through of something, versus adding things at the last minute, or sort of changing scope, or discussions happening too late in the process. And so that is sort of the other thing that I want to drive with that. And I think all of that gets us ahead, but that's 2 or 3 months of us trying to get to a state where we can talk like that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's not going to be just changing the light bulb and it's working. Yeah, so I think taking this last part, what you were saying about epics, yeah, that's really what I would love, is to have engineering more involved early on. And I mean, we have Andre and Michelle, and they do a great job. But as you said, then the engineers themselves, the people that are building things, don't feel ownership and don't have the visibility. And we've so many times we've heard that, like, I don't feel the ownership, and if I knew that maybe we would be doing it this way, perhaps I would have implemented it differently, or I would have talked with that person, or whatever it is. And I I really don't like our model of assigning things to people when the milestone is about to start. Um, and then, okay, here it is. This is what you have to do. Go do it. Um, yeah, I would prefer if they were more involved before and felt not, I think people are interested, but just say that, okay, it's okay for you to be curious and interested and involved in these issues. We're not going to measure your output in that regard. Like, we're not, because right now it's just about MRs that are merged. And so if you take your eyes out of the merge requests, you're not shipping. That's, I think, is what engineers are thinking about. So every single minute that they spend in an epic looking at something that we're still in pasta mode and discussing the spaghetti, if it's going to have chili sauce or it's going to be carbonara, it's they're wasting time in merge requests, right? I love pasta, by the way. And yeah, I would love to see engineers more involved that. And so I think perhaps to what you were saying about the epics is maybe having the planning breakdown and breaking things down at the epic level. Like, we have the epic, and then we have the direction, and then engineering together with everyone, but mostly engineering would then decide how we're going to break this down in a way that fits what we want to build. On the other side, what I would love to do more is work less for the milestones themselves and in those small issues, and giving those detailed specs about, we're going to build this with that button and it has this spacing and that size and it goes there and it goes there, and with all of those high fidelity mockups, which I already try to do very less, but most of the times it's needed. And I feel that engineers think they need it, think they need those mockups, but I don't think that engineers actually need them. I think they don't give themselves enough credit for the sensibility and for design and for user experience that they have. And I think we actually have, like, when I see engineers later on in the merge request, when they're building things and putting things together, they start questioning, hey, does this make sense? Maybe we should have, like, this button should link to that other page, or we should have. And that's amazing. And I would love to see that involvement earlier, so that I don't need to be so hand-holding during the MR process. Because I think what I would love to do is just give um, a sketch that we can all agree on is like a good broad way of doing something, and then they figure it out, because we've laid out the goalposts and we said, hey, this is the outcome that we want, this is more or less the solution that we're aiming for, like this, these are the technical boundaries and this is the design boundary, but now you decide what happens inside of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the design thing. I don't recall having to be so opinionated prior to engineers picking things up in editor, or providing like as high fidelity. And engineers are all different and some have different levels of competence of like that, but like we would often have like terrible sketches or things that I would go like, Chrome console, like dev tools, move around and change and be like, yeah, this is like the thing. And then, it would get, engineers would tweak it as they needed to go and do it. And so um, it is interesting that there seems to be somewhat of a heavier reliance on that in this group. And I don't know that I have an answer for that other than um, we did in editor often things that we knew needed that more comprehensive design pieces. There are certain interactions that do
Yeah.
just you want to be more thoughtful of. Um, we would never schedule implementation and design in the same milestone for those things. Um, and I don't know that luxury has been afforded to you or to the code review group before, but I think like one of the things that I don't want to say passionate about, but like a stickler for is being very reasonable about what we can actually do. And historically proven very unreasonable to expect good design and engineering delivery to happen inside of a milestone. And so I'm often very willing to just say, oh, we're only going to do design. And like, we have no plans to like actually devote any engineering effort to this until the next milestone. And I'm okay
Yeah.
with that personally, because I think that
Yeah.
that takes the pressure off of both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think for the whole time that I've been at GitLab, that's it rarely we had occasions of design and development happening in the same milestone. Only when there was very high confidence and very low risk of something not going forward, and it was a very small issue. Um, Usually, what happens is design work, and when I say design is broad design, so understanding what we're going to build and how we're going to build it. And it can be a very, as you were saying, like some issues require more user interface work, others require less user interface work, but they all need to be designed, they all need to be spec'd out, they all need to have the scope defined. And even if it's a very technical issue and only engineers are involved, I'm only seeing people discuss issues one milestone before. Um, and I think that's generally okay, in the sense that, like, as you move and you get closer to the actual moment you start building things, that's the moment you need to have, as much as possible, more certainty. But I mean, things could still be up in the air, and you can experiment in the merge request on a few things. But I want to see people caring more and start being interested more about the issues like 2 or 3 milestones before. Because what I've noticed is, if we're only caring about, like I spend a very big proportion of my time is reviewing merge requests that are happening in the current milestone. So I don't have enough time to think and be interested about other things as much as I would want to. And going back to what I was saying, also engineers don't do that. So what happens is that we only notice like a problem is a problem, or an issue is an issue worth implementing one milestone before, and that is usually not enough time for us to think about it, discuss it, break it into other parts, get everything together for it to be implemented. So usually what happens is what you were describing for this milestone, where in 13.7, we have the toggle file by file merge request. We have the marking files as reviewed. We have the custom suggestions. We have reviewers, some of the issues that slipped. And all of that was, I could say that except for reviewers, a big part of reviewers, except that part about the filter, which we were expecting for it to work. Other than that, everything else was thought about one milestone before, or even less, just a few weeks before it was scheduled and it was in the current milestone. And I think a lot of it has to do with focus, as you said, like focusing on less things. And to be honest, it's just trying to do less, because we try to do too much for the number of resources that we have. And there's just, I think, I don't know if it's if it really exists or not, but I mean, we're building, GitLab is a suite of products inside of one product. The code review group, it could be just one product. We could be a startup, right? And the same for every other group. But and when we're competing with companies that have more than one designer and more than one PM, and you know what I'm saying? It's crazy that we're shipping at this velocity, sometimes faster than our competitors that have more people. And that is not necessarily bad. The bad thing is that we're sacrificing all of this because we're trying to ship more in this. And yeah, and I think if we had more focus, as you said, and intentionally said to engineers and to everyone, like, slow down, it's okay to take time from delivery work to discuss what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, if we're solving the right problems and if we're solving them well, or if we think we're going to solve them well. I think that's more valuable than always being in the shipping mode.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, yeah, I think all of this just boils back down to the focus piece. And I think that's the one that I'm hopeful that we get a handle on sooner, figure out what we're going to go do, and make sure that we sort of stick on that track. And instead of filling in with other insert random feature work that we could do, we fill in with all of the usability and all of the performance work that we need to do, instead of trying to do 10 features and all of that at the same time. Wait, this is one of the
Also
things that,
that,
yeah, in engineering or in editor, I often only had 2 direction and issues ever, like playing in a milestone 2 or 3. And I was sort of like, these are the big things I care about. Here's some other, like, not user facing, but stuff that, like, I need done because it's analytics or it's whatever. And then let's figure out, like, the other work that we need to be doing that, like, helps keep the day-to-day moving. Because we just, the fact that, like, I'm trying to draft like 5 release post items makes me feel uncomfortable right now, because, like, we would never have tried to release 5 things in editor. And they're different groups and, like, whatever, but, like, that's just very hard to communicate.
I would
to a way.
actually, yeah, I think I think you're right in the balance of what you were describing for editor, but at the same time, me not knowing so well the what was happening inside of editor, I would actually, if you told me, oh, we were actually doing 5 direction items and then the rest is just very few performance and bugs, I would accept that. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that, because I would think, oh, maybe they have less legacy, they have less things to refactor, they have, yeah, less things to attend to because they're a new group compared to code review and or source code before. But we have so much legacy, and I think that's also another thing, is if we dedicated more and more and more time to all of those backstage performance polish bugs, I think not attaining them is what is also making us creating a lot of problem for us when we're trying to do direction issues, basically. So by having all of that depth, we're trying to move faster on the direction issues. We're actually always finding things that are broken and that we can't do right now, or we have to do differently. So we need to change the UX, or we need to change the scope. And we only find that when we're knee deep in the MRs, and that has happened with reviewers. That has happened with the toggle for file by file that you described. That has also happened with the custom suggestions for messages for custom commit messages for suggestions, because we had so many depths there, when we had so many issues that we needed to attend to, that the scope couldn't be properly addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that focusing the group fixes it. It's going to take me time to get figured out what that focus is and codify it in a direction page, but hopefully that helps. So
yeah, I mean, I'm here to help, of course. So whatever, I'll review the merge request that you have there and see if there's anything that I can contribute. Yeah, I think it's not difficult for us to have a milestone with just one direction issue. There are just so many issues to pick from. it's not hard. So if you were saying like we will need time to like 2-3 milestones to get into the right pace and into the right, I think, mental state of how we're going to maintain this focus and maintain this predictability and maintain this, at the end, quality of what we're shipping and the problems that we're addressing. I think we can start that today by just well, I'm gonna. It's, of course it's not that way, but just if we only scheduled 100% of bugs, we would still have a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
and we will fix so many things that maybe some people will think, oh, this is actually a new feature. It's not. It's just that we fixed the bug. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I think I need to get into 13.8 because I think it feels like one, we'll be low on capacity, but two, it's probably a good time to like take our foot off of the sort of like crazy new feature direction stuff anyways, because we'll be lower on capacity, and we do have the pile up of sus and transient bugs and the other
Yeah.
UX improvement thing that like we can pull from sort of all of those things to make sure we're caring about experience and then cleaning up some of the things that we know from all of this work that's happening in 13.7, and then hopefully by 13.9, 13.10 we'll have a better idea of where we want to go more consistently directionally.
Yeah. Catherine, you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say I really agreed with everything Kai said about focus, and then I was wondering, since I know, for example, James when he was PM, there were so many epics that he created to house things like about basically all the problems that we've heard about, you know, tracking files that have been already reviewed, navigation, all those epics are kind of out there. Is there a um, certain factors that Kai you'll take into account to prioritize certain areas over others? Just if that's something you already know.
um I have been having, I think every week in this call I ask Pedro like, what's the one thing that you want me to think about or focus on, sort of is maybe where that starts. I also talked right after I joined the team. I talked to every engineer just to sort of get their sense of things, and I've talked to Michelle and Andre, and obviously I talked to James.
Every engineer, really?
Yeah, I had a one-on-one with every engineer on the team.
Wow, that's amazing.
But I guess where I was going with that is I've been trying to like get that input from people on what they think is important, and then look at what we're doing and try and build a cohesive theme. And I think one of the things that I've seen is maybe two things. One is overarching sort of the philosophy that GitLab has is that code review should be fast, and we should be supportive of getting code merged before sort of like anything else like that. Those are sort of like the top of the list. And so with that in mind, I'm trying to look at the things that are like, well, where do we end up in bottlenecks or slowdowns, or like what are the things that cause that? I think reviewers is a great step in terms of helping that. And I think one of the things about reviewers is like, if you pick the wrong person to review your MR, like you put that thing on a grinding halt until you find the right person, right? So I think that's an area that I want to go explore more. I think more importantly, though, with a reviewer is the signaling that needs to go back and forth is sort of the other area that we need to deal with, in terms of how do we make sure that like I as an author know the status of my merge request. I as a reviewer know that I have reviewed this and the ball is back in the author's court, and sort of eliminating a lot of those manual things that we have. And if you look, we've talked about, I think, a few weeks ago when we spoke, it's the tracking of unread files and disks is sort of like the one big thing that Pedro says, and I think that ties very well into reviewers. I think the thing about reviewers, that the path that it was on, or was potentially on, was so much about like how do reviewers fit into approval rules and sort of all these other things. And I think that's a byproduct maybe, or something we figure out later, versus like how do we communicate status, because status tends to show up in lots of these epics of that piece. And I think that's the thing that I would say we go focus on. I've also closed some of James's epics and things that we're not going to go do, and I think that's another thing that this group has not done is, I love James, but there's a lot of stuff out there, and I think we just need to be more realistic about what we're going to do, and not have some of these like longer pie in the sky things that maybe we're not going to get to.
Awesome. That was perfect. That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I apologies if this whole point sounded more like a rant from me, but just wanted to make sure I was not alone in wanting to plan more ahead and have more predictability.
You're really not. Because Kai made a great point about, even with the research, it's kind of a thing where you could spend a bunch of time researching or doing the solution validation for a very specific feature that's going out, but then you didn't dedicate that time to the depth and kind of something that would contribute maybe more significantly. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and it's
and go ahead, Kai.
I was just saying, it is a two-sided coin for sure, because it doesn't matter what we do in product and design to sort of like get ahead. If one of the things that I'm still going to work with Andre and Michelle on is getting dedicated planning time as part of engineering capacity, because I don't think this group does that. They don't account for engineers needing to do planning breakdown during a milestone for future work.
Yes.
And
yeah,
something
exactly.
that editor did, that was something that Darva initiated, that like on Monday mornings, the backend engineers actually got a set of issues based on epics that they knew were upcoming, and had to go and like provide breakdowns and give their thoughts and opinions. And those conversations would start well in advance of us, being able to schedule or do something. But they were always looking, engineers were always in the issues looking at them, because we just accounted for that as part of capacity. And so that's another piece that we're going to have to keep working on and trying to leverage in. But it's got to happen as a group. It can't just be us, and it can't just be engineering. So we'll have to figure out how we work all of that out, but that'll also help move the needle the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was saying before, is that I want engineering to be more involved before, and I just don't think Andre and Michelle can do all of that, and while everything else that they have to do, I don't think that's fair. So and again, it will have another sub-product of that, is that engineers will feel the ownership of what they're building more and more. So and we will be able to have better technical decisions because we have predictability, and that will probably allow us to move faster as well, and create less technical debt. So there's a lot of positive effects to that. About just one final thing I wanted to say about the bugs and issues, bugs and usability issues and UI polish. Like Catherine did a great job of creating those issues from the SUS. Some of them are things that we can do. Some of them are not. Some of those are things that we already did, but maybe people didn't know. And other than that, we also have this quarter, we're pushing really hard on those, I don't know how many issues it is. I think 100 issues, or maybe, I don't know if it's so many, but that we're pushing in terms of getting the UX right so that we can improve the SUS. And another thing I wanted to share with you, Kai, which I don't know if you're also aware, is that I've been trying to take some time every week to create issues just from the, we did a prioritization session not a prioritization session, we did a async critique exercise in Figma on the merge requests page. I don't know if you saw that.
I left lots of nitpicky comments for you. I think you'll find some.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, there were so many comments that I wasn't sure if you had participated, but yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of, exactly, as you said, there are so many comments, and so I'm just now in the finishing up creating issues from the UX department critique. I haven't even looked at the product critique yet. So you have to look into that. But just the sheer amount of issues that I've been creating, or that I can create, because creating issues takes time, and especially these ones that already have something actionable and a proposal of things to fix. So even like this month, I created, I think, 16 issues, and I still have, I think, 16 or 15 more to create, and then I'll be done. And those are just UI polish, UI text, or plain front-end bugs. That's it. It's not like something big. It's just things that are plainly wrong, and maybe tie in really well with the nitpicks that you had. So yeah, we have a lot of issues that we can focus on that could provide a buffer for us to refocus and reorganize and have better direction as a group. So if you want help with those or finding them, let me know.
Yeah, I've seen your merge request UX improvements epic and the issues that get added. So yeah, I think we just need to figure out. MRs have a lot of. We could do debt and bugs in UI polish forever and probably never dig ourselves out of the list. So at some point we'll need to get smart about what we do. But yeah, I appreciate you doing those as well. That's I know by the time I got to the product side of that Figma review, it was already well inundated. And so I can't imagine what you ended up with out of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I linked to the issue where I'm relating them in case you're interested.
Awesome. Cool. Well, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, Catherine, you too. And then I'm going to go back planning at some point and hope that we can get 13.8 at least semi-planned.
Yeah. Semi-planned. Exactly. Cool.
Bye.
Thank you so much for this conversation. This was great. And yeah, have a great rest of your week.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.